Okay, we're continuing with quotes from this book, The Holy Grail of Wisdom Quotes by me, Pete Rogers. A lot of these quotes are not in this book, though, by the way. I got the ones I'm doing on my YouTube channel. There's like 5,000 pages of them. The book was only about 700 pages, so I don't even have all of these in there. But I'm just going to tell you something. This guy, Steve Prefontaine, I love this guy. This is the attitude, like my Olympic champion wrestling coaches at Stanford, Mark Schultz and Dave Schultz. They're a bit fanatical, like maniacs. And the reason I tell you that is that's characteristic of people who are great. They're over the top obsessed with something. And as a matter of fact, if you really want to be good at something, you should train yourself to become like this in your own way, because it drives the intensity level up so high that you get better faster. I've seen guys who became great at wrestling and some other things, and they often had this like fanatical attitude about them of wanting to be great. And it's highly valuable. I started getting really good at biochemistry once. I was like, this is the language of God, how he writes the book of life, and I must learn it to become a great doctor or scientist. And once I started thinking about that way and wanting to like almost challenge the professor, like I'd sit right in the front row and say, today I'd read for hours the day before. I'd read 4 hours or more, as much time as I had before I'd go in that lecture, because I didn't want that guy to get anything past me. I saw it as like a competition between me and the professor. What I'm trying to say is, I'll wait till you see how this guy talks, and you'll get a sense of how he drove himself to be great. You have to have some basic talent, and you have to figure out for yourself what it is you want to do and what you have talent for. But to get yourself psyched up like this, you become so much better. Like Mark Schultz was like this in a major way. Okay, anyways, let's listen to Steve Prefontaine. He would train twice a day even. Okay, and here's what he has to say. He ran races at multiple different distances. And he, like when he was in college, he'd win multiple different distances. He'd take first place and all kinds of things. It was extraordinary. So here he goes. A race is a work of art. I like to make something beautiful when I run. It's style. It's doing something better than anyone else. It's being creative. And then somebody, criticized him, and he responded, you say I'm weak. You said I couldn't do it. Well, thank you. You gave me everything I needed to prove you wrong. A lot of people run a race to see who's fastest. I run to see who has the most guts, who can punish himself in an exhausting pace, and then at the end, punish himself even more. To give less than your best is to sacrifice the gift. The best pace is a suicide pace, and today looks like a good day to die. No matter how hard you train, somebody will train harder. No matter how hard you run, somebody will run harder. No matter how hard you want it, somebody will want it more. I am somebody. I can endure more pain than anyone you've met. And that's why I win, because I can endure more pain. So anyways, that's a mentally tough guy right there. It's great. I'll put a link in the description below to some videos about him. And, he's a great, heroic guy. Okay, I'm just going to show you one quote by Walter Payton. He was a running back with the Chicago Bears, 1985 Super Bowl champions. He was one of the greatest running backs of all time. And somebody once asked him, why were you so successful? Because he was incredibly successful, and he was always training and working out and doing all kinds of things over the top more than other people. And he said, because I wanted it more. And that's a big part of becoming great, is that intense desire to become great. Okay, we do a couple other quotes here, some educational stuff. First one is Mary Pride. She's born in 1955. I think she's still alive as far as I know. She became like the queen of the homeschooling movement. She was a very smart lady. She had degrees in electrical engineering and computer science. She raised 9 homeschooled children. She writes about homeschooling topics. She wrote a book called The Way Home. She says, why aren't housewives considered working wives? Homeworking is what young wives are supposed to do. Homeworking means working at home. We are not supposed to be the breadwinners. That is the man's job. But we are supposed to make an economic contribution. A homeworking wife has the best job in the world. Homeworking, as we have seen, is based on scriptures. Home leaving is the opposite. It is not. And she's got a good point right there, too. And I can tell you, when I was young, most of the moms stayed home. Most women didn't work, unless they were divorced or something, because that made them poor. And it's a very natural thing to want to be home with your kids, with your family. In the home, the mama is the queen. She's the boss of everything. She's the boss of Papa, too. So why wouldn't you want that? You go to some job, what I've seen is women like getting a job and going somewhere, in their 20s. It's fun. They're with their friends. They maybe go out on the weekend. Once they have a baby, though, they want to be with that baby. And then especially if they have to go back to work, another 5, 10 years goes by, and they're like, why am I doing this? I want to be home with my kid. But usually they're trapped into a life where it's hard to change at that point. Okay, Mary Pride continues. She says, we want the children's hero to be Jesus Christ, not some punk rocker. Okay, and that was a little bit like, you see that happen in a lot of families. What I've seen happen is the wife wants to divorce the husband, so she starts trying to turn the children against the father. My wife did that to me. She wanted to get full custody of the kids in divorce, so she started saying all these bad things about you. Oh, dad's weird. He's just an autistic Harvard guy. He's not normal. I was a great wrestler when I was young, and so they would say things like, oh, wrestling is gay. You don't want to wrestle. It's crazy. It's a bad sport. So it was kind of like my kids had this idea that I was just this weird autistic guy because, I'm working. I'm coming home at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night, covering surgery at 3 different hospitals. And then I'm getting bad mouth at home to my kids, and stuff. And then the kids get sent away for the weekend, so I can't spend any time with them. Initially, when she was planning on divorcing me. So what I'm trying to say is that led to bad things because then the kids take on different role models. Or role models become some crazy celebrity, wearing an earring with a bunch of tattoos, walking around like an idiot. Okay, so then it's only when they get a little older, have a little more sense, they're like, gee, Dad, you did all these things. Wow, why didn't you ever tell us? And I'm like, well, you weren't around that much, and I wasn't always around that much. Anyways, yeah, kids need good role models to help them focus their efforts in a good direction. Okay, Mary Pride continues. The only reason the USA is drifting towards educational totalitarianism is that up to this point, parents have been willing to give up the responsibility for their children. The public schools are the coercive utopians' catechism classes. We have experts enough already scattered here and there in the field of education. The results of their expertise, just look at the shattered lives of millions of schooled yet uneducated Americans. Each new crisis brings the experts out in swarms, recommending solutions that bring them more power and prestige, though they are the very people who caused the crisis in the first place. Yeah, what does public school education do? It makes kids hate reading, hate learning, and you get all these functional illiterates. That's what it produces, a functional illiterate who doesn't know anything. Okay, Mary Pride continues. How long can Christians in contemporary society continue to survive with any genuine faithfulness to Christian teaching if they do not create a new social structure? Yeah, it was back like in the 1800s when the Catholics felt they're being treated unfairly in the public schools. So they said, you know what, we're going to make our own Catholic school system. And that was one of the best things they ever did. The Catholic school system is superior to the public school system by far. They really should have developed it more. The Catholic high schools are superior to the public high schools. Okay. They might not offer as wide a variety of classes, but all the other benefits, the kids are much better behaved. They know each other. The families know each other. There's a community. Much less drug abuse, much less violence, much less kids getting pregnant. All of that is good. Okay. She continues. If children are a blessing, why don't people want to have more of them? Fear of beggary. We are the richest people in history, but the most fearful of the costs of child rearing. If Christian women all bowed their heads to beg God's forgiveness and pledged that they would start having children, I really believe God would heal our land and send revival. Okay, so basically there's a lot of truth in that. The Christian women, from about 1970 to modern, started not wanting to have so many kids. And as they diminished their population, their influence on society has been diminished. Their influence in the public school system diminished. And now they're kind of being you know what? The next word is side. Okay, that's what's happening to Christians in the USA. And they're so stupid they don't even realize it now that well, many of them. And the USA itself, morally, ethically, has gone down the tubes. Okay, and also getting back to Steve Prefontaine, when I was a young guy, it was cool to be macho. It was cool to be strong. My favorite movie was Sylvester Stallone, Rocky, and we all felt like we were young Rocky. We were just a little nobody walking around our neighborhood and we're like, oh, gee, sometimes I could be like Rocky, and be the champion of something. That was the dream of a young guy. That was the American dream of a young male athlete, was to someday be like Rocky and, win the championship in your sport, in wrestling and whatever sport you pursue, Okay. Also, it's funny. I can remember being in junior high and talking with, my friends, and we'd all be talking about how big do you think you're going to be when you grow up. And I'm like, well, I think I'll probably weigh about 185. And they go, that small? You're going to be that small? I'm going to weigh 200. We were all little guys, play football and stuff. And, right now, what do I weigh? I weigh about 165. Okay. But I'm an old guy. When I was young and big and strong, I weighed about 175. But what I'm still trying to say is young guys all have this illusion they're going to be big superstar athletes. But still, that macho attitude is good. Because nowadays, I see all these young guys, they're wearing bracelets like women. They're wearing earrings like women. It's like, what the hell is with you? When I was a young guy, you didn't wear any of that stuff. I mean, it's weird how feminized and feminine a lot of these young guys are. It's not. It didn't used to be that way. If you acted that way, you would get teased so much it's not even funny. Okay, let's see. What's next here? She said, did you know that Christians invented hospitals? Yeah, they invented most other things we consider modern civilization. Okay, Mary Pride, the last quote from her, she said, I don't think Jesus was kidding when he said, he who would be greatest among you shall be servant of all. Okay, we're going to do one more. This is kind of a little bit of a long session, but I want to do Wendy Priesnitz. She kind of goes with Mary Pride. She's another homeschool expert. She's founded the Canadian Alliance of Homeschoolers. So here's her first quote. Learning requires context. We learn best when we are interested. We learn best when we have a real life need to learn a real skill. Yeah, you learn things because you care about them, not because some lady you don't know in the front of the room is telling you must memorize this for the test on Friday. That's bogus learning. Public school learning is fake. That's why people forget everything. You learn what you care about, what you want to know. You play a sport, you learn how to wrestle. You remember how to wrestle. You remember your technique. Okay, I could go in and teach college level technique right now just because I'll never forget those techniques. They were important to know or you get your butt kicked, okay? You remember things you care about. How to drive a car, okay? All right, Wendy Priesnitz continues. Perhaps the most basic assumption our society makes about education is that learning can and should be produced in people. This assumption leads to another one, that learning is the result of treatment by an institution called a school. You really don't need a school to learn. When I want to learn something, what do? I say I start studying it. I'll watch a video about it, then I'll look for books. I'll watch a bunch of videos, because a lot of times when I watch the videos, I'll figure out, who are the real experts, who's the good teacher. And if somebody gives a good lecture on YouTube, I'll go, gosh, that person sounds good. I'll see if they wrote a book, and then I'll read their book. And then the book will give me new ideas. I'll cross-correlate it with, biochemistry book, some other textbook or something, then they'll usually give me a clue whose else was a good book, who wrote the good papers, and I'll start reading the research papers. But you do that just because you're curious, and then I'll keep a file on the disease. This is diabetes, hypertension, obesity, whatever, and I'll keep accumulating it. Then I'll give mini talks, make a bunch of talks. That's how you learn anything. And then you try to find people you can talk to. You talk to some diabetes patients, talk to some doctor buddies that treat a lot of diabetes, and you start getting all these ideas. I mean, that's how you learn anything. Okay. All right, she says, because schools suffocate children's hunger to learn, learning appears to be difficult, and we assume that children must be externally motivated to do it. No, learning actually comes internally from what we want to know. Okay, Wendy Priesnitz continues, the solution is for learners to create their own curriculum. Yeah, like Donald and Miller showed with the Book Whisperer book. You just put the books in the front of the room, in the middle of the table, and the kids will pick them out and pick the one they want. And her students were all the top 10% in the school. And here she goes. She says, children don't need to be taught how to learn. They are born learners. Yes. And as wonderful as these elite programs like AP, science classes in high school and stuff may sound, the reality is often very different. They're still the same. The underlying assumptions are the same. Children, no matter how intelligent they are, must be fed information based on someone else's agenda. And the result is the same. Enthusiastic, active learners get turned off from learning. Home-based education is not an experiment. It is how people learned to function in the world for centuries. Almost all the great geniuses, if you study them, they were all homeschooled. Okay? And there's no reason to think people today can't do the same thing. School is the experiment, not the lack of it. And I think that experiment is in trouble. Children are born to be curious, independent, active, self-directed learners. And they will remain that way if the school doesn't dampen their natural curiosity about the world, taking learning and turning it into something unpleasant and coercive. My own process of challenging assumptions has convinced me that we need to do nothing less than dismantle our public education system and start over from scratch. Yeah, you should get rid of the public schools. You can't fix them. Just get your kid out of the public schools. They don't want to be good. That's what I've learned too. If an institution doesn't want to be good, the public schools don't want to be good, you can't fix them, okay? You can't fix colleges that don't want to help the kids. They just want to make money. It's just how it is. All you can do is figure out how you work around them. Okay, Wendy Prefontaine continues. We're almost done here on Wendy Prefontaine. She says, there is no point continuing to pour increasing amounts of money into trying to fix our school systems when it is those systems that are the problem. Most unschooling parents will tell you that the main reason they want to avoid schools, public schools, is the poor socialization that occurs there in the form of competition, bullying, and violence, rudeness, put-downs of family, and oversensitivity to peer pressure. Okay, she continues. Self-knowledge is the... Okay, actually, this is a quote now from a different guy, John Taylor Gatto. So John Taylor Gatto is very much like Wendy Prefontaine, a guy who's a big proponent of homeschooling, who had experience with the public school system, and came to the conclusion it's too messed up. So John Taylor Gatto, I just put in here because he's complimentary to her quotes. He said, self-knowledge is the basis for the development of other knowledge. It is better for kids to engage locally. Self-directed learning and teaching is best. It is much more powerful than one-size-fits-all schooling. These kids nowadays are ahistorical. Kids should know about their ancestors, their own intellectual traditions. Homeschoolers are routinely 5 to 7 years ahead of public school kids in their ability to think. Okay, so that's it for quotes today. I'll put some links to Prefontaine below. Hope you found that helpful.